Welcome to the kingdom. I'm Chris, and this is Good Enough Gaming. Howdy, folks, and welcome to the month in review for June. There's some good stuff to talk about here, so let's jump into it, starting off with our honorable mentions. First up in the solo category is Caveman's Action. Now, some models go for a comic book or cartoon-like look to it, while others, like this one, go for realism. It may look simple, but sometimes simple done well is better than extravagant done okay. I would say this model has an excellent mix of color and earth tones, highlight and shade. You could almost picture the model moving if you stared at it long enough. I mean, just look at those eyes and the detail. Tremendous attention to detail, excellent use of a simple color palette, but still very well executed. I am shocked that this one didn't make it to the podium. The next honorable mention goes to Gronky Kong 64, who has done the difficult task of painting using object source lighting. It's a very difficult technique to pull off, not only because you have to make sure you have the right light and shadow in the right places, but I mean, look at the gun, for example. You have to have light and shadow, but you have to create variations in color, light, shade, and edge highlighting, all with the same color. So even where the light's hitting, you still have to create that differentiation, and that's hard enough to do when you have different colors to work with. But to do all of it within the same color, that's very, very difficult to do. It's one of those techniques that I really appreciate because I don't think I have the patience or the ability to attempt it enough to get it right, which is why I always give major kudos to those who risk it for the biscuit. And our last honorable mention for the solo category is from the Architecture AI, who didn't just paint a model, but created a bit of a diorama with that scenic base. So both the silver and the gold are done in non-metallic metal, which is another one of those techniques like object source lighting that I will leave to others because while I think it's absolutely beautiful, I don't think I have the patience or talent to get it right. Everything else also has really crisp highlighting and all the details look great. You can take a look at the face, the hair, the cloth. Everything looks fantastic. Moving on to the unit category, the first honorable mention goes to Jort, or Yort, I guess depending on what part of the world you're in, who's painted his orc bikers with a desert scheme, but at the same time has given it enough accents on the wheels, the gas tanks, and the windshields to keep them interesting. Jort has also gone with purple skin instead of green, and has put the green on the wheels instead. It's giving a real Mad Max desert, wasteland type vibe that I really, really like. Now for this month, there's only 2 honorable mentions in the unit category, so the other one is going to go to Party Bear Minis. Now it may at first look like a bit of an assault on the eyes, but give it a second look and you have a really bold synthwave theme that has great uniformity and nice, bright, colorful alien bases. The zoom in also shows careful attention to details with the highlighting. It was risky using the green, the purple, and the blue, all very bold and bright in nearly equal amounts, but I think he's pulled it off here and given us a very, very vibrant, very, very busy, but in a good way, painting scheme. And moving on, instead of legendary, with the completion of the Wood Elves, we get to see army showcases, which I always enjoy. I'm thoroughly looking at massive armies that have all been painted with a lot of attention to detail, where someone can show just how much enjoyment, passion they have in their painting projects. So, my honorable mention for this one goes to Taylor Hildebrand. This army has really nice color cohesion, and yet different unit types like the Wendigo still look very, very distinct. So it doesn't look cookie cutter, but it does look uniform. Plus, the dragon centerpiece shows that you can still achieve a decent looking large model using only a few colors. And I might be wrong here, but it looks like Taylor used either contrast or speed paints or something, of those new paint lines, and shows that you can get a solid result without having to spend hours and hours layering and detailing on those larger models. So, congrats to everybody who's submitted, and I'm starting to notice over the past couple months more submissions with dioramas, fancy bases, and the quality just across the board is getting better. So these are getting more and more exciting to look at every month. So let's move on to the big news and events. First of all, OnePageRules attended the UK Gaming Expo in Birmingham, including both a Grimdark Future and an Age of Fantasy tournament. Now, OPR attended the UKGE last year, and judging from the pictures from this year, they needed to expand more tables for demo games, which means they're getting growth over last year's attendance. So now that OPR is starting to attend big events both in the US, the UK, and on the continent, I think we can expect the game to continue growing in popularity, which is always good. The next big item is the release, or teasing the release, of the Void Sun Threat, a mission pack for the Grim Dark Future. This book is going to be the equivalent of the Assault on Malhadra, which was for Grimdark Future Firefight, and I have been thoroughly enjoying it since its release. The Assault on Malhadra had 18 missions. I haven't played them all. I think I'm at about 14 or 15, and at least half of them were a ton of fun to play. The other half were fun, not, oh my goodness, I got to play this again, but I've enjoyed all of them, and some of them really had some clever mechanics to them. Now, it may be a little bit more challenging to carry over the narrative missions that have really cool, interesting game mechanics and features into large scale versus into a skirmish game, but if they can pull it off, then Void Sun Threat will be a must-buy for anyone who likes to play Grimdark Future. So I definitely plan on getting it at release. Stay tuned, and you'll start seeing Bat Reps testing out those missions like I've done for Malhadra. And just as with the narrative for Malhadra, Void Sun Threat will focus on 4 factions, giving them a little bit more flavor and introducing some named characters. In this case, it's the High Elf Fleets, the Saurian Star Host, the War Demons, and the Jackals. Now, the Star Host and the Jackals are unique factions to OnePageRules, and the Star Host is one of the armies that's in the upcoming plastic model box set that should be hitting GameFound pretty soon. So if you've been toying with the idea of starting a new army of one of these 4 factions, this might just be that proverbial straw you've been waiting for to push you into actually getting it started. Okay, moving on. This next item, normally I don't cover. Every month, there's lots of short stories. There's the writing jams that come out every few months. So OPR does a lot in that area. I normally don't talk about them, the releases of fiction and short stories and so on and so forth. But it just so happens that both of the short stories released at the beginning of June have the same author, Ronald Long. And it also happens that I recently interviewed Ronald for the Line of Sight podcast. And so I figured, wow, the planets must be aligning here because his books or his short stories come out in June, and this Sunday will be my post the interview with Ronald on the podcast. You can come and listen to us talk about playing OPR, about writing fantasy. He even teases a bit in that interview that he is working with OPR, and now in a weird twist of irony, we had the interview, the stories came out, and now we have the actual interview publishing. But stay tuned this week and you'll get to hear me talk to Ronald about OnePageRules and about writing. Now, this next bit of news is that OnePageRules is holding their very first mission jam. They have, I think it's 2-3 times a year, a writing jam where anybody who wants can participate to contributing to the lore and the narrative stories of the Grimdark Future and of the Age of Fantasy. But this time, it's about writing missions. So the normal short story competition that's being held is now being shifted for a mission development competition. So the jam begins on July 7th, so in about a week. It's going to run for a full week. Normally the writing jams run for 48 hours, but this one they're giving us a week. And the winner is going to have a chance to land a spot as a freelance mission designer with OnePageRules. Now, that's a pretty good first prize. So if any of you have ideas for cool missions, start polishing up the mission parameters and see if you can give the game one of its next missions. Now, one thing to keep in mind, I haven't seen clarification of this one way or the other. I think you're only allowed to submit one. If you're allowed to submit multiple, then I'm sure they'll get tons. But if not, you're going to have to decide which mission you really want to put forward, because basically this is your job interview if you want to do it. So good luck to everybody. I'm interested to see what kind of missions we come up with. I know Mini Wargaming did something like this recently for their Ravaged Star. I submitted a few missions to it. Unfortunately, I didn't get picked. But there was another guy. What was his name? I don't recall, but he got like 3 of them, which was really impressive. So start thinking, what would be a great mission? And you might just be OPR's next mission designer. Now, this last item in the news came from the monthly live stream. Because the live stream talks about some things coming in the future, like concept designs for upcoming STL files, I usually don't talk about those. I'll talk about them when they actually release as models. But as you may or may not know, OnePageRules is in process of a massive overhaul of its army books. And it's slated to be finished, or roughly finished, around the time of the yearly September rules update. Now, during the live stream, Tano gave a few bits of information about what to expect. If you want all the details, I would recommend going and watching the live stream. It's about 2.5 hours long. The too long didn't read, however, is that generally no units are being changed. Instead, the overhaul is going to give every single army, or at least most armies, ones that don't already have one, a couple things. Every army will get an army-wide rule, which will give it some kind of flavor, kind of like how the robot legions have self-repair. It's almost a universal rule for the army, and it makes the army feel like an army of sentient robots. So it'll get an army-wide rule. Every army will get what he calls combos. So that is units which will be able to enhance or build on that army-wide rule. So for example, and I'm just giving this as a hypothetical, all the Robot Legion gets self-repair, and this unit gets it on a 5+ instead of a 6, but something like that. So that's the combo. He also said every army is going to get some kind of debuff to use against your opponent. Maybe that will come in the form of like a preferred enemy. You get to pick a unit that you're specially targeting, or something like that. He mentioned it's still in kind of the broad phases, but category-wise, he wants to have each army have some way to somehow inflict some kind of detriment or penalty on your opponent. And on top of that, every army will also get some kind of unique weapon rule. And then lastly, there's going to be an overhaul of spells, which I think is good. Some of the armies, their spell lists are just atrocious anyways, and others, many of the spell lists, they're basically the same spells, just with different names. So if the spells start to get a little bit more flavor, tailored a little bit more to the way the army looks and plays and its lore, it'll start to feel a little more like it's magic unique to that particular army. So this is very, very big change. Now, one big announcement, though, is that the robot and the undead rules are going away, like gone forever. Now, I have a bit of a love-hate relationship with them. Since I play both undead and robot legions, I have seen just how devastating those can be for either side. And usually it's devastating for the robot legion, the controlling player. I have, however, seen it come in clutch every once in a while, where my opponent was hoping to charge, inflict damage, and just wipe me out. But because of that rule, one of my models stuck around and therefore contested an objective, and it was a game changer. But it's going away. So my concern is that while that rule could be devastating, it still gave those armies something unique. The idea that my big block of skeletons never ran away and fought till the last one crumbled, that felt right for an undead army. Now, having said that, there's a chance that the big army rule that's being created for each army will somehow incorporate something like that. So the undead will have something similar, and the robot legion will have something similar there as well. In fact, let me give you an example here. When Tano was talking about these changes, he mentioned how the universal rule fast is being taken away from the Dark Elves. But then the army itself is getting a special rule just for the Dark Elves, which is basically the same thing. Not identical, but the same general idea of extra movement at some point in the turn. So they lose a general rule, but get a specific rule that does the same general thing.
And now let's take a look at the STL files for this month to see what we have coming out of the Orcs, for Quest, for the Dwarves, and all that other good stuff.
I think the desert terrain here looks nice. It would be very quick to paint. I do think one of the downsides, though, is you wouldn't be able to stack it. Because of the way they have the bases there, you can see the piles and buildup of sand and debris and crumbling towers and things like that. And I would really want to take this terrain and be able to layer it. So take one of the longer pieces and then put one of the smaller segments on top to create floors or stories. But the way it's designed here, I don't know if you'd be able to do that without it looking a little bit out of place. But otherwise, great terrain for skirmish or for part of a larger tabletop. We have our quest item, or a quest model for Age of Fantasy, and this is one of those examples of casting against type. We have a Shadow Stalker Druid. And typically when I think of Shadow Stalkers, you think of nightmares and fever dreams and things out of horror stories. And when you think of a druid, you don't. You tend to think of someone who, lives in nature, communes with the trees, so on and so forth. I mean, the guy's even got the little birdie on his shoulder. So it's kind of an interesting paradox or juxtaposition here of having this nightmare creature who I guess decided he was tired of nightmares and decided he just wanted to live in a log cabin in the woods. But still, lots of good detail. This is one of those models that you could really put a lot of time and attention to, because between the fabric, you've got the stitches holding the different segments together. The staff has both leaves and the pine cones. You've got the bird that you could paint very, very bright and colorful to offset the shadow stalker, who would probably have a much darker kind of overall paint scheme to it. So a lot of potential with this one. The fantasy quest model was casting against type. This one's a little bit more, I don't know if you'd say stereotypical, but you have a high elf instigator. So you have this high elf woman here who she's got her pistol and this gigantic piece of parchment. So either she's got a lot of instructions, questions, data, details, or this is the honey-do list she's about to hand her instigator husband. And my guess is that's why he joined the fleets, because he didn't want to do all that stuff. To the orcs, we have an orc hero model. Now this one actually has a lot of different variations, as you can see here. Male and female heads, different kinds of weaponry you can equip them with. And what I thought was particularly interesting, this one here, if any of you are old enough to remember that old Arnold Schwarzenegger movie Commando, there's that scene where the woman tries to rescue him by shooting that quad rocket launcher. And there it is right there. So if anyone gets this model, you've got to somehow paint some homage to Commando in that. Well, you don't have to, but it would be nice. Here for the orcs, this one a little bit more subdued. I still stick with my argument that the backpacks look a little too much like a shop vacuum. He does have those two antennae to give it a little bit of character. Overall, it's not a terrible model. It's got a lot of detail, a lot of accents with the tokens hanging around his neck. You've got the markings on his armor, so there's plenty of possibility for this guy. Orc specialists, you're going to want to print a lot of these guys, because as their name implies, these are your special weapon teams. So we've got flamethrowers, we've got rocket launchers, we've got heavy machine gunners, we've got whatever the heck these are. It looks like, they're the spears with grenades on the end. So literal boomsticks. We've got all kinds of stuff, plus different heads. So you've got a lot of options here, but that's good, because if you're 3D printing your own models, you could have an endless number of these orcs, plenty of stuff to choose from, and can really supplement your army. And they look pretty decent. From infantry into vehicles, we have the orc war trike. And this one, I don't even know if you'd call it a war trike. It's a little big. It's almost like a three-wheeler or not a half-track, but you get the idea. When I think of a trike, I think of a one-person vehicle. This one's got two, but still, it's kind of a really cool idea. You have the driver, and then you have the gunner. So again, sticking with that very nomadic, not quite, I don't want to say barbarian, but very kind of primal, tribal, survivalist look to the bike. It's really a good-looking model. Anyone who still plays 40K, I bet you if you put that on the table in one of your orc games, you'd turn some heads. With the attack buggy, a lot of character on these models. Definitely, and I keep going back to this, but it works. The Mad Max vibe. Like, this is the kind of vehicle you would picture for people who live out in dunes, out in Badlands, out in some kind of very, very hostile landscape where you don't have the ability to design the vehicle you want and then build it. Instead, you piece it together from what you can get your hands on. So definitely looks like a dune buggy or something you'd ride out in the sand dunes for anyone who's ever had the chance to go do that. Plus, as with all the other options or models, you've got plenty of different options, both for the turret on top and the weapon attached to the vehicle itself. And then you got this guy here who is playing on his Game Boy. Oh, no. He's launching missiles. I get it. Got it. Moving over now to Age of Fantasy with the end of the Wood Elves, we're now starting to get a look at the Dwarves. And these Dwarves, I do like what he's doing with them, because Dwarves are one of those very, very old, very popular armies. Everyone and their mother who starts a model company releases Dwarves. So it's very difficult to release a dwarf army that doesn't look exactly like every other dwarf army. So on the one hand, you could look at this and say, well, it kind of is. You have a short, stunty guy with lots of facial hair, and he's got a hammer, and he's got armor. Yes. But I think with the way that OPR is trying to give them an industrial look, mixed with like the mining look, as you'll see when we look at some of these other models. They are trying to find their own niche. Now, Dwarven Miners isn't exactly playing against type. That's pretty standard. But it's the first time that you've seen that kind of aesthetic, at least that I've seen, applied across an entire army rather than, for example, in Warhammer Old World, where you have a unit of miners and every other unit is different. Here, they're trying to give this idea that every single model somehow has connections to this idea of steam engines and pipes and tunneling, and give it a really, really industrial look. So all over the model, you can see the rivets. You can see here, like on the shoulder pad, those are bolts actually holding it on there. So it's very different from what you would normally see, but it still looks very much like, I don't want to say the stereotypical dwarf, but you get the idea. Same kind of look at work here with these champion models. So you've got the standard padded armor. That's nothing fancy. But again, look at the shield. It's bolted on. Or you look at the axe here and it almost looks like there's a steam engine or a furnace or something inside, and there's the ventilation right there. So it is giving something unique. But of course, you've got your standard, standing on a keg of ale. You've got a mechanical crossbow over here. So I do like it. My only concern is I've got so many dwarves as it is already. The last thing I need to do is start collecting another dwarf army. But I don't know. Some of these pieces look really good. Moonlords also look interesting. There's some elements of them I'm not totally sold on. I really like the idea that they're just covered in runes, almost like it's a keychain or a prayer beads or something like that. And then as needed, they'll pull out the correct rune and utilize it. And then you can see here the candles on his helmet to, again, give that idea that this whole army has a mining theme to it, not just the miner unit. As far as the staff here, I don't know. The way it looks, it almost looks like a plague doctor who's got his head inflated. I know that's not what it's supposed to be, but it looks like there's the eyes and then the beak. So I'm not totally sold on that. I would have pictured a giant rune, like an iron carved rune, or a giant, a flat surface, like you can see the tokens here hanging with the rune carved into it. So that might be my one gripe about it. But otherwise, I think it looks pretty nice. The core units for mountain dwarves. And again, like I said, you can definitely tell there's some stereotypicalness to them, although, I don't know, the clean-shaven ones look a little bit, obviously the women here, but I don't know, there's something about dwarves and big beards. Like, when they don't have the beards, they just don't feel like dwarves. And while these are mountain dwarves, the shields, and again, you see the bolts on the axes, they give this idea of industry. Also, the helmets are very, very unique. They almost look like something you'd see in like a World War I trench or something. So it's very different over top of the standard padded armor overcoat that you have here. So the weapons give it a very, very distinct flavor. You don't see many dwarves with axes that look like that. And if we scroll through some of the options here with these halberds, you can definitely get more of an industrial kind of feel to it. They have the little furnace in the middle, more rivets, bolts, screws, things like that. That's usually not what you'd associate, or at least not what I would, with, say, mountain dwarves. I would picture these would be dwarves that have some kind of a foundry. There's factories, there's machinery. Mountain dwarves, I picture more like everything's made out of wood and stone. And yeah, they work with steel and metal, but everything will be smelted or cast rather than assembled and then, riveted together. I don't know. Maybe I'm just talking about out my backside. You guys let me know. In here, I think it's very, very unique. I know the dwarf army that I purchased, they have firearms. It's basically an old school blunderbuss, wooden stock with a metal tube on it, and that's what they fire. Whereas here, the guns look a little bit more complicated. So it gives them a little bit of flavor. They've got the steam engines on their back. They even got a little bit of smoke billowing out, so that looks interesting. You've got the crossbows, which aren't your standard crossbow. Instead, they look a little bit more mechanical. Like, I don't think there's much wood on this crossbow at all, except maybe that beam right there. And then you have your command squad. Now, that sword looks a little bit stunty. I know he's a dwarf, but, it's not a gladius. But still, I suppose it'll work. I like the banner. I know I was really hard on the Wood Elves with their banners, but it's because the banner didn't feel like it matched the army, whereas this does. The crossbeam for the banner is a furnace with, it looks like, I don't think those are horns because you have the musician up here, but this looks very dwarvish. You have the cloth, but it's offset by steel, rivets, iron. It looks like it belongs to that army. So I'd say nice job on that one. The double-barreled horn here, I'm not sure how I feel about that one. If Josh were here to observe, I'm sure he would say all kinds of things that I would have to cut out. The flame cannon. And I like this one. It almost looks like it doubles as a still in times of peace. But its size, that massive ball at the back where they mix or concoct whatever chemicals they're using and then pump it into the barrel, which then spits it out the front. I mean, that looks like an intimidating piece of artillery. Now, it could just be because the picture here is a lot larger. Maybe on the table it won't look quite so intimidating. But I think it looks distinct. I know I've seen some of the flame cannons on other fantasy armies, sculpts, and STL files and things, and this one, it does stick out to me. Plus, the crew here looks pretty good. You've got the fireman or the coal shoveler back here. You've got the commander. I'm not exactly sure what this particular job is. I guess we just have a great big piece of wood to feed the beast. Who knows? But still, if this is what we can expect from the other pieces of artillery, like the rest of the army, I think they found a way to give the dwarves a unique look that we haven't seen already, while still making them feel dwarvish and not giving them some kind of crazy accent just to be different. Well, if you are a Patreon, I believe it's tier 2, but it might be tier 1 as well. One of the loyalty rewards you get are the giant Titanic STL files to say thank you for continuing to support OPR. And this month, it was an Alien Hives Titan. And this monstrosity looks absolutely massive. Super intimidating. You can tell by the scale with the little guy here just how big this thing is. I'm sure it prints in a number of different pieces. But that looks like a really cool model. Might be a bit of a pain to paint with all the little nooks and crannies and crevices, so you might spend a little while filling in the details, but that would be a beautiful centerpiece to have for any Alien Hives army. So there you are, folks. There's everything that came down the pike for the month of June. As we head into the middle and end of summer and increasingly towards the big army redo in the fall, I think we're going to have a lot more stuff to talk about in future monthly reviews. So let me know what you think about the sculpts. Which ones do you think look good? Which ones would you change if you could? Any other comments, things I got wrong or missed? And I will see you next month for the next monthly review. Until then, keep your dice on the table.